It was one of those quiet November evenings where the rain kept tapping against the windows, like it had nowhere else to go. David sat at his dining table, surrounded by stacks of student papers that seemed to multiply every time he looked away. He was a high school history teacher, 42 years old, and these days his life followed the same pattern every single day. Wake up, go to work, come home, grade papers, go to sleep, repeat. 3 years ago, his life had been completely different. His wife had been there, filling the house with laughter and warmth. But cancer took her away, and since then David had been living in a kind of fog. He went through the motions of living without really feeling alive. His daughter was away at college now, which made the house feel even emptier. The silence had become his constant companion. His neighbors were kind people. They'd wave at him when he pulled into his driveway, sometimes bring over casseroles they claimed they'd made too much of. But David knew what they really thought. They saw him as that sad man who kept to himself, the one who'd forgotten how to smile. And honestly, they weren't wrong. That evening, David was marking an essay about World War II when he heard it. A soft knock on his front door. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:47. Who knocks on someone's door at 9:47 on a rainy Tuesday night? He set down his red pen and walked slowly to the door, feeling a flutter of anxiety in his chest. He wasn't expecting anyone. He never expected anyone anymore. Through the peephole, he could see a young woman standing on his porch. She looked to be in her early 20s, and she was absolutely soaked. Rain had plastered her hair to her face, and her makeup was running down her cheeks in dark streaks. Her jacket was torn at the shoulder. David's first instinct was to pretend he wasn't home. In today's world, you can't be too careful, right? But then he noticed something that made him pause. The woman kept looking over her shoulder back toward the street like she was afraid someone was following her, and she was shivering not just from the cold but from something else. Fear. She knocked again, more urgently this time. Her hand was shaking. David stood there frozen, his hand on the doorknob, having an entire argument with himself in his head. Every true crime show he'd ever watched was telling him not to open that door. But then he thought about his daughter at college, and he wondered what he'd want some stranger to do if she was standing on their porch, scared and alone. He took a deep breath and opened the door. The woman nearly fell forward when the door swung open. She caught herself on the door frame, and that's when David saw the bruise forming on her cheekbone. It was fresh, the kind that would turn purple by morning. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I need help." David's heart was pounding, but he stepped aside. "Come in," he said, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. "You're safe here?" The woman stumbled inside, water dripping from her clothes onto his hardwood floor. She wrapped her arms around herself, and David could see her whole body was trembling. Not just her hands, but her shoulders, her legs, everything. "What happened?" David asked gently, closing the door behind her and locking it. "I need to call the police," she said, pulling a phone from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. "My phone's dead. Do you have a charger? Or can I use your phone?" "Of course," David said quickly. He grabbed his phone from the coffee table and handed it to her. "Here, use mine." The woman took the phone, but her hands were shaking so much she could barely dial. David noticed she kept glancing toward the window, toward the street outside. "Take your time," he said softly. "You're safe now. Whatever happened, you're safe here." He went to the bathroom and grabbed a towel, then brought it back to her. She took it gratefully and pressed it against her face, and that's when David saw just how young she really was. Maybe 23, 24 at most. Someone's daughter, just like his own. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." "Don't apologize," David said. "You did the right thing." And standing there in his living room watching this terrified young woman trying to stop shaking, David felt something he hadn't felt in 3 long years. A sense of purpose. A reason to do something that mattered. He didn't know it yet, but opening that door was about to change everything. For both of them. The woman's name was Lily, and as she sat on David's couch wrapped in the towel, her story came tumbling out in broken pieces. She'd moved to the city just 2 months ago for a job as a graphic designer. It was supposed to be her fresh start, her dream opportunity. But starting over in a new place is harder than people think. She didn't know anyone, and the loneliness had started to wear her down, so she'd done what millions of people do these days. She downloaded a dating app. The guy seemed nice enough in his messages. Funny, polite, had a good job. They'd agreed to meet at a restaurant downtown, somewhere public and safe. At first, everything seemed normal. They talked about movies and music, the usual first date stuff. But then something shifted. When Lily said she needed to leave because she had work early the next morning, he got angry. Not loud angry, but the quiet kind that's somehow worse. He insisted on driving her home, even though she'd brought her own car. When she refused, he grabbed her arm, hard enough to leave marks. Lily had managed to pull away and make it to the parking lot, but he followed her to his car and kept insisting she get in. She felt trapped, scared, not sure what to do. Then she noticed he'd left his car running. When a light turned red and he got distracted by his phone for just a second, she did the only thing she could think of. She opened the door and ran. She ran for blocks, her heels in her hand, rain pouring down. She knocked on 3 different doors before David's, but no one answered. Or maybe they did what David had almost done, pretended no one was home. "I thought he was following me," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I kept looking back and I swear I saw his car." David felt his chest tighten with anger. Not at Lily, but at the situation. At the man who'd scared her. At a world where a young woman couldn't even go on a date without fearing for her safety. "Let's call the police," he said gently. "Right now." Lily nodded and tried to dial, but when the operator answered, she couldn't get the words out. Panic had taken over. David could see her starting to hyperventilate, so he carefully took the phone from her hands. "It's okay," he said. "Let me..." He explained the situation to the dispatcher, who said they'd send officers as soon as possible. But it was a busy night, multiple calls coming in. It might be 30 to 45 minutes. When David hung up, Lily looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "I'm so stupid," she said. "I should have known better. I should have..." "Stop," David interrupted firmly but kindly. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." Lily broke down then, really broke down, and David did something he hadn't done since his wife passed. He reached out and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Not crossing any boundaries, just letting her know she wasn't alone. "I don't have anyone here," Lily said through her tears. "I moved here by myself. My friends are all back home, hours away. I thought I was being independent and brave, but really I'm just alone." David felt that word hit him like a punch. Alone. He knew that feeling all too well. "My wife died 3 years ago," he found himself saying. The word surprised him. He never talked about this with anyone. "Cancer. And my daughter's away at college now, so I get it. Being alone. It's the hardest thing in the world." Lily looked up at him, and in that moment something passed between them. An understanding. They were both people who'd been dealing with loneliness in different ways. And somehow they'd ended up in the same living room on the same rainy night. "Why don't you change into something dry?" David suggested. "I have some of my daughter's old clothes in her room. They might fit you." Lily nodded and followed him down the hall. David found a sweatshirt and sweatpants, things his daughter had left behind when she'd gone to college. Lily took them gratefully and changed in the bathroom. When she came back out, David had made tea. Not because he was some expert on crisis management, but because it was something his wife used to do. When things got tough, she'd make tea and say that at least they could be warm while they figured things out. They sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around warm mugs, and waited for the police. And they talked. Really talked. Lily told him about her job, how she'd always loved art and design. David told her about teaching, about trying to make history interesting for teenagers who'd rather be on their phones. "Your daughter's lucky to have you," Lily said quietly. David shook his head. "I haven't been much of anything to anyone these past few years, just going through the motions." "But you opened the door tonight," Lily said, looking him straight in the eye. 3 other people didn't. But you did." Before David could respond, he saw something through the kitchen window that made his blood run cold. A car was slowly driving past his house. Then it came back. And again. Lily saw it too, and the color drained from her face. "That's his car," she whispered. The tea in David's hand had gone cold, but he couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on the car that kept circling his block, slow and deliberate like a shark circling prey. Each time it passed, Lily shrank deeper into her chair, her earlier tears replaced by a paralyzing fear that David could feel radiating across the table. "Are you absolutely sure that's his car?" David asked, keeping his voice as calm as possible even though his heart was racing. Lily nodded, unable to speak. Her whole body had gone rigid. David stood up quickly and moved to the living room, turning off every light on the first floor. The house plunged into darkness except for the glow from the street lamps outside. He could see the car more clearly now. A dark sedan, windows tinted, moving at a crawl past his house before disappearing around the corner. 30 seconds later, it was back again. "Come with me," David said, taking Lily's hand and leading her away from any windows. They went to the interior hallway, the safest spot he could think of. "Stay here. I'm calling the police again." He dialed the emergency number, and this time his voice was more urgent. "I called about 40 minutes ago about a woman who was assaulted. The man who hurt her just found her. He's driving past my house right now, and I think he knows she's here." The dispatcher's tone changed immediately. "Sir, I need you to stay inside and away from windows. Units are being redirected to your location now. Do not engage with this person. Do you understand?" "I understand," David said, but his jaw was clenched. Part of him wanted to march outside and confront this person, to tell him to leave and never come back. But he knew that would only make things worse. He returned to Lily, who was sitting on the floor of the hallway, knees pulled to her chest. She looked so small, so vulnerable. It reminded him of his daughter when she was little and would have nightmares. He'd sit with her just like this until she felt safe enough to sleep again. "The police are coming," David said, sliding down to sit beside her. "They'll be here soon." "How did he find me?" Lily whispered. "How does he even know I'm here?" David had been wondering the same thing. "Did you have your location services on? Maybe he was tracking your phone somehow?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Oh no. We were texting earlier, before the date. What if he has some app or something?" In today's world, that wasn't even far-fetched. David had read articles about how easy it was for people to track others through their phones. The technology that was supposed to keep people safe could also be used against them. They sat in silence for a moment, listening. Then they heard it. The car had stopped. Not passing by this time, but stopped right in front of the house. David felt Lily's hand grip his arm so tightly it hurt. He put his finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. They sat there in the darkness, barely breathing, straining to hear what was happening outside. A car door opened. Footsteps on the wet sidewalk. Then on the porch steps, David's front porch steps, the doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. Then came the knocking. Not polite, not gentle. Aggressive pounding that made the door rattle in its frame. "I know you're in there," a male voice shouted from outside. "This is ridiculous. She's my girlfriend, and there's been a huge misunderstanding." David felt anger surge through him. Girlfriend? Misunderstanding? This man was trying to rewrite reality, to make himself sound reasonable when they both knew the truth. Lily was shaking again, silent tears streaming down her face. The knocking continued, getting louder. "Come on, be reasonable. I just want to talk to her. She's confused, she's emotional, you don't understand." David made a decision. He stood up and walked to the door, not opening it, but standing close enough that his voice would carry through. "The police are on their way," David said, his voice steady and clear. He was using his teacher voice, the one that commanded attention in a classroom full of rowdy teenagers. "You need to leave this property immediately." There was a pause. Then the voice changed, became almost friendly. Too friendly. The kind of false charm that made David's skin crawl. "Look, man, I don't know what she told you, but she's got some issues, you know. She gets these ideas in her head. I was just trying to help her and she freaked out. All I want to do is make sure she gets home safely." "She is safe," David replied. "Safer than she'd be with you. The police will be here any minute. I suggest you leave before they arrive." "You don't know what you're talking about." The false friendliness vanished, replaced by anger. "She's lying to you." "Whatever she said is a lie." David didn't respond. He'd learned from years of dealing with difficult students and parents that sometimes silence was more powerful than words. He just stood there, waiting. The man outside tried a few more times, alternating between fake concern and barely contained rage. But David didn't engage. He checked his watch. The police had said they were coming. Where were they? Then, like angels descending from heaven, David heard the most beautiful sound. Sirens, getting closer. The red and blue lights started flashing through his windows. "This isn't over," the man shouted, and David heard footsteps running back toward the street. But it was too late for him. The police cars screeched to a halt and officers were already out, surrounding the vehicle. Through the peephole, David could see everything happening. 2 officers had their hands on the man's shoulders, walking him back from his car. Another officer was checking the vehicle. David unlocked his door and stepped out onto the porch. A female officer approached him immediately. "Are you the homeowner who called?" "Yes," David said. "And the woman he was after is inside. She's safe but very shaken up." The officer nodded and called to her partner. "Get a statement from the suspect. I'll talk to the victim." David led the officer inside to where Lily was still sitting in the hallway. When Lily saw the police uniform, she burst into tears again, but this time they seemed like tears of relief. Over the next hour, Lily gave her full statement. She described everything that had happened at the restaurant, the parking lot, her escape. The officer took photos of the bruise on her face and the marks on her arm. She was professional but compassionate, never making Lily feel judged or doubted. Meanwhile, another officer informed David that the man, whose name was Derek, had 2 previous complaints for similar behavior. Nothing had been prosecuted because the victims had been too scared to follow through. But this time would be different. They had witnesses, evidence, everything they needed. "He'll be arrested tonight," the officer told them. "Assault, attempted kidnapping, stalking. He's not going to be bothering anyone for a long time." As the police wrapped up their investigation, David realized something. It was almost midnight and Lily had nowhere to go. Her apartment was 40 minutes away, and she was in no condition to drive even if her car had been here. "You can stay here tonight," David offered. "My daughter's room is all set up. You'll be safe, and in the morning I'll drive you wherever you need to go." Lily looked uncertain. "I can't ask you to do that. You've already done so much." "You're not asking," David said with a small smile. "I'm offering. Besides, I think we could both use the company tonight." And so, for the first time in 3 years, David's home wasn't empty. There was someone else breathing life into those quiet rooms. Someone who needed help and someone who reminded him why connection between people mattered. As he showed Lily to the guest room and said goodnight, David realized something had shifted inside him. That fog he'd been living in for 3 years had started to lift, just a little, and it had all started with one knock on the door. Morning came quietly, with sunlight streaming through windows that David had forgotten could look so bright. He'd barely slept, kept awake by a strange mixture of adrenaline from the night before and something else he couldn't quite name. Around 6 in the morning, he gave up on sleep altogether and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The house felt different, not empty like it had been for years, but alive. He could hear soft footsteps from the guest room, water running in the bathroom. These small sounds that he used to take for granted suddenly felt significant. Lily appeared in the doorway around 7, wearing the same borrowed clothes from the night before. Her hair was still damp from a shower, and the bruise on her face had indeed turned purple overnight. But her eyes looked clearer, less frightened than they had been. "Good morning," David said, pouring her a cup of coffee without asking if she wanted one. It just seemed like the thing to do. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," Lily admitted, accepting the mug gratefully. "I kept waking up thinking I'd dreamed the whole thing, but then I'd remember I was safe." They sat at the kitchen table, that same table where they'd had tea the night before. In the morning light, things felt less dramatic but somehow more real. The crisis had passed, but the connection they'd formed remained. "I called my friend back home this morning," Lily said. "Told her everything. She wants me to come stay with her for a while, but I have work. I can't just leave." David nodded, understanding the dilemma. Life doesn't stop just because something terrible happens. Bills still need to be paid, responsibilities still exist. "What about your job?" he asked. "Do they know what happened?" "I sent my boss an email this morning. She's actually been really understanding. Said I can work from home for the rest of the week if I need to." They talked more over breakfast, which David insisted on making. Just scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy. But it felt good to cook for someone again, to have a reason to use more than one plate. Lily told him more about her design work, showing him her portfolio on her phone. David was genuinely impressed by her talent, the way she could take an ordinary idea and turn it into something beautiful. She talked about her projects with such passion that it reminded him of how he used to feel about teaching, before grief had dulled everything. "You're really good at this," David said, looking at a logo she'd designed for a local coffee shop. "Thanks," Lily said, and for the first time since she'd knocked on his door, she smiled. A real smile. "It's the only thing I've ever been good at, honestly. When I'm designing, nothing else matters. All the noise in my head just goes quiet." David understood that completely. That's how I used to feel about teaching. making history come alive for kids who think it's boring. But lately, I don't know. I've just been going through the motions. Why? Lily asked simply. David was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. When my wife died, it felt like all the color drained out of the world. Everything became gray, and I guess I just never found my way back to the colors. Lily reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. Maybe you're starting to now. After breakfast, David drove Lily to her apartment. She directed him through streets still wet from last night's rain, past familiar landmarks that probably felt less safe to her now than they had yesterday morning. Her apartment was in a nice building, modern and secure, but as they pulled up, David could see Lily's hands tightening on her seatbelt. You okay? He asked. Yeah, she said, but her voice was uncertain. It's just weird. Yesterday morning I left here feeling fine, normal, and now everything's different. Do you want me to come up with you? Just to make sure everything's okay? Lily looked relieved. Would you mind? They went up together, and David waited while Lily checked every room, every closet, making sure no one was there, making sure she was truly safe. It broke his heart a little, seeing how that one terrible date had stolen her sense of security. Before David left, Lily did something that surprised him. She asked for his phone number. I know this is weird, she said quickly, and you've already done so much. But I was thinking, maybe we could get lunch sometime. I'd like to thank you properly. And honestly, I could use a friend in this city, someone who gets it. David found himself smiling. I'd like that. And for what it's worth, I could use a friend too. They exchanged numbers, and as David drove home, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Not the big, overwhelming kind, but something smaller and more manageable. The hope that maybe things could get better. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Lily and David became friends. Real friends. They'd meet for coffee on Sunday mornings, and she'd show him her latest projects while he'd tell her stories about his more interesting students. She introduced him to her coworkers at a company happy hour, people closer to his daughter's age who treated him with warmth instead of pity. He invited her to a school event where his students were presenting history projects, and she was genuinely interested in their work. Lily started seeing a therapist to work through what had happened. She was honest with David about how hard it was, how some days she felt strong and other days she was scared to leave her apartment, but she was facing it head on, not running from it. Inspired by her courage, David made an appointment with his own therapist, someone he'd stopped seeing after his wife died because he'd convinced himself he was fine. Turns out he wasn't fine, but he was ready to work on it. He also called his daughter more often, really called her, not just the obligatory, how's school conversations. He told her about Lily, about what had happened, about how helping someone else had somehow helped him too. His daughter was quiet for a moment after he finished the story. Then she said something that made David's eyes water. Dad, you sound like yourself again. Like the dad I remember from before Mom died. 3 months after that rainy November night, David attended an art show at a local gallery. Lily had been working on a personal project alongside her paid work, and tonight was the opening. The gallery was packed with people, all admiring the various pieces on display. David found Lily's work in the back corner. It was a mixed media piece combining photography and digital art. The image showed a door, partially open, with light streaming through it. The title card read, The Door That Opened. Lily appeared beside him, nervous but excited. What do you think? It's beautiful, David said honestly. Tell me about it. It's about that night, Lily explained. About how sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. How one person's decision to be kind can change everything. 3 people didn't answer their door that night. But you did. And it changed my life. David felt his throat tighten. It changed mine too. 6 months had passed since that November night, and David's Sunday morning routine had completely changed. Instead of sitting alone at his dining table, he was at their usual coffee shop. The 1-2 blocks from his house where they always managed to snag the corner table by the window. Lily arrived right on time, carrying her laptop bag and wearing one of those scarves she always wore now. She'd explained once that they made her feel put together, like armor against a world that sometimes felt too harsh. You're not going to believe what happened at work this week, she said, sliding into her seat and pulling out her laptop before even ordering coffee. That was their thing now. They'd catch up on life while waiting for their drinks to arrive. David smiled. He loved these updates, loved seeing her excitement about her job, her life, her future. Tell me, remember that nonprofit I told you about? The one that helps survivors of dating problems? Lily's eyes were bright with excitement. They asked me to redesign their entire website and logo. For free, obviously, but David, this feels like exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. That's incredible, David said. And he meant it. You're going to do amazing work for them. Their coffee arrived and they settled into comfortable conversation. Lily showed him the preliminary sketches she'd been working on, explaining her vision for making the nonprofit's materials more approachable and less intimidating. David listened, asked questions, offered his thoughts when she asked for them. Then Lily mentioned something that caught David's attention. I've been thinking about starting a support group for people who've been through similar situations. My therapist thinks it could be really helpful, not just for others, but for me too. That's a big step, David said carefully. He'd learned over these months that Lily didn't need him to protect her or tell her what to do. She needed him to listen and support whatever decision she made. How do you feel about it? Terrified, Lily admitted. But also ready? Does that make sense? Like I've spent 6 months healing myself, and now maybe I can help others do the same. David understood that feeling completely. Actually, he'd been having similar thoughts himself. You know how I run that after-school history club? He said. Well, I've been thinking about starting something else. A support group for students who've lost parents. There are more kids dealing with that than people realize, and they need a place where they can talk about it without feeling like they're bringing everyone down. Lily's face lit up. David, that's perfect. You'd be so good at that. They talked about their ideas, bouncing thoughts back and forth, encouraging each other the way real friends do. Not the superficial kind of friendship, but the deep kind that's built on shared understanding and genuine care. After coffee, David drove Lily to her therapy appointment. It had become another part of their routine. She'd go to therapy, he'd run errands or grab lunch. Then he'd pick her up and they'd sometimes take a walk in the park or just sit and talk in the car. While he waited, David thought about how much had changed. His house wasn't silent anymore. Oh, he still lived alone, but it didn't feel lonely. There were text messages throughout the week, phone calls when one of them had news to share, plans constantly on the calendar. His daughter had come home for spring break and been shocked by the transformation in her father. More than that, David had started engaging with the world again. He'd joined a book club at the library. He'd started going to the gym 3 times a week with a colleague from school who'd been asking him for years. He'd even gone on a date, though nothing had come of it. But the point was, he tried. He was living again, not just existing. When Lily came out of her appointment, she looked tired but peaceful. Therapy did that to her sometimes, drained her emotionally, but in a way that felt productive. Good session? David asked as she got in the car. Really good, Lily said. We talked about boundaries. About how I get to decide who I let into my life and on what terms. And I realized something. What's that? You're the only person besides my therapist who knows the whole story. My friends back home know some of it. My coworkers know bits and pieces, but you know everything. And that's because you earned that trust. Not by asking for it, but by just being there when I needed someone. David had to clear his throat before he could respond. You did the same for me. I didn't realize how isolated I'd become until you showed up and reminded me what connection feels like. They stopped for lunch at a small sandwich shop they discovered together. As they ate, Lily scrolled through her phone and laughed at something. What? David asked. My mom would have loved you, Lily said, showing him a photo. It was an older picture. Lily with a woman who had the same eyes and smile. She died when I was 19. Cancer, like your wife. She always used to say that the best people are the ones who help without expecting anything in return. She sounds like she was wonderful, David said softly. She was. Lily agreed. I think about her a lot when I think about that night. About how scared I was that no one would help me. But then you did, and it reminded me that there's still good in the world. That's what my mom always believed, even when she was sick. That goodness exists. You just have to be brave enough to look for it. As the months continued to pass, both David and Lily moved forward with their plans. Lily launched her support group, starting small with just 3 other women. It was hard at first hearing their stories, but it was also healing. They learned from each other, supported each other, reminded each other that surviving wasn't the same as thriving, but it was a start. David started his grief support group at school, and 10 students showed up to the first meeting. 10 kids who'd been carrying around pain they didn't know how to express. By the end of the school year, the group had grown to 20, and the principal was asking David to train other teachers to facilitate similar groups. The friendship between David and Lily continued to grow in unexpected ways. She brought her artistic eye to his classroom, helping him design better visual aids for his lessons. He helped her practice presentations before big client meetings, offering feedback and encouragement. They celebrated each other's wins and supported each other through setbacks. One Sunday morning, almost a year after that rainy night, they were sitting in their usual spot at the coffee shop when Lily said something that captured everything perfectly. "Do you ever think about how that night could have gone differently?" she asked. "Like, what if you hadn't opened the door?" David had thought about it. More than once. All the time, he admitted. "I think we saved each other," Lily said quietly. "I mean, obviously you saved me that night, but I think maybe I saved you too, in a different way. We were both drowning in our own ways, and somehow we threw each other a lifeline." David nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle over him. "You know what the strangest part is? I almost didn't open the door. I stood there for probably 30 seconds arguing with myself, thinking about all the reasons I should just pretend I wasn't home." "What made you open it?" Lily asked. "Honestly, I thought about my daughter. I thought about what I'd want some stranger to do if she was standing on their porch, scared and alone. And I realized that connection, real human connection, requires risk. It requires being willing to step outside your comfort zone and help someone, even when it's inconvenient or scary. That's what makes you a good person," Lily said. "You chose kindness when it would have been easier to choose safety." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people walk by outside the window. Then David said something he'd been thinking about for weeks. "I'm proud of you, you know, for everything you've done this year, for facing your fear, for starting that support group, for not letting what happened define you." Lily's eyes got a little misty. "I'm proud of you too, for coming back to life, for choosing to engage with the world again instead of hiding from it." As David drove home that afternoon, he thought about that moment a year ago when he'd been standing at his door with his hand on the knob, trying to decide whether to open it. He thought about all the ways his life had changed since then, all the ways he'd changed. His house came into view, the same house where Lily had stood shivering on the porch. But it looked different now. Not like a tomb where he was waiting to finish out his days, but like a home where life happened and would continue to happen. Inside, David walked to his mantel where photos stood in frames. His wife smiling in a way that still made his heart ache, his daughter at her college graduation, and a new photo added just last month, Lily at her art show standing in front of the door that opened, grinning with pride and joy. These were his people. Some gone, some far away, some nearby, all connected to him by threads of love and care and shared experience. He wasn't alone. He'd never truly be alone again, because he'd learned the most important lesson that rainy November night. Connection is a choice. Every single day we choose whether to open the door or keep it closed. We choose whether to reach out or pull back. We choose whether to risk getting hurt in exchange for the possibility of finding something beautiful. David had chosen to open the door, and at Hay,